This is Umar for BoxNation. We're at DAZN HQ, and this was DAZN's dream to have the two biggest promoters in the world on the same platform. Didn't think it was going to happen, but here we are on April 1st. You join someone who's been at DAZN for a long while.
I thought that was going to be the gag. It was always DAZN's dream to have the two biggest promoters in the world, but they couldn't make it happen, so we got Eddie and Frank. I thought that's what you were going to say. But thank you. It's very nice.
And you would think, I've just spoke to Mike Riddell, you'd think the price would increase since Queensberry joined in, but it's 30% off for new customers on April 1st. So what an incentive that is.
Well, it is a great incentive. All the best boxing from around the world involving the world's best promoters. All of them on there. It doesn't get any better than that. And who'd think it'd cost less money? That's a unbelievable early Christmas present.
It's a very early Christmas present. But what do you think about the price?
Same. I mean, I thought DAZN's value for a long time was exceptional. But now it's the same price, actually discounted for a period of time, to add Queensberry and all their fight cards and all their great fighters. Just actually doesn't make sense. What it does do is it shows you the success that DAZN are having. And what I love about it is they're having success, but they're not just wallowing in the success. They're investing in the sport and saying we want to add more. We want to give more value to money to subscribers. And it's incredible. And the great news for us is, which we keep drumming on about today, is no clashes. Just a real mapped out schedule of big fight nights. And basically, if there's a big fight night, it's on DAZN. And I think what the platform have built has been incredible. And we're really excited about the future.
Look forward to it. Frank, I spoke to you in length about this yesterday, and before we come on to other topics, so it's only right, Eddie, I get your thoughts on what was a horrible weekend really for boxing, but you could look at another way and you could see the two people who sadly left us had incredible lives that we could only dream of. George was one of the most iconic sportsmen of all time, not just boxers, and of course, Colin, probably the most recognisable British boxing journalist there was. So Eddie, just get your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, on Colin, I think... even when I was going to press conferences with my dad, at his shows years ago, I'd see Colin Hart, and he always had that face and that presence that, that's Colin Hart over there, and early on you kind of in awe of him because he was such a powerful boxing journalist, really, and one of the old school. And then, as Frank said recently, would pop up all the time, whether it's at York Hall, whether it's at a press conference, maybe he's not even reporting on. He was a guy that was in love with the sport like we all are. And, I wasn't as close to him as probably Frank and a lot of people, but I had the utmost respect for him as a journalist. He never minded upsetting people to give his opinion. Is that right, Frank? It was like, I'm going to speak my truth, and I'm really sorry if you don't like it. And we had a few little run-ins maybe about AJ and stuff like that over the past, but that was his opinion and we respected it. You can't just expect a journalist to play ball with you. They're going to write their opinion, and it wouldn't be a respected, powerful journalist if you just got on with them all the time.
As proven, with his passing, that everybody has shown tremendous respect for everybody in boxing. I've not heard a bad word about him from anybody.
And in terms of George, incredible that actually Colin was one of the few that picked against George, which is ironic they left us on the same weekend. But yeah, he picked Ali in that fight. But in terms of George and his career, one of the best heavyweights of all time.
Yeah, I mean, Frank will know him from his first sort of tenure as a world heavyweight champion. And I kind of look back over that period, and particularly the Joe Frazier fight, where really... I think he was sent to Jamaica to lose, wasn't he, really? And he was, they sort of set up a homecoming for Joe Frazier, and he went out there and knocked him out. And I remember more growing up for his second spell, and actually what people don't realise about the second spell is that spell went on quite a long time before he fought Michael Moorer. And Frank said earlier, I didn't realise, Frank promoted him in London as well for a show. And before he beat Michael Moorer, and the fight before, he lost to Tommy Morrison. And I remember the Moorer fight, and it was like Moorer just picked him. He was an undefeated fighter. I think he was 32-0 at the time or something like that. And it was like he picked Foreman because it was a good name. And, Moorer was a much smaller guy. And I just remember the knockout, with an uppercut and a right hand. And it was like, oh my God, George Foreman's world heavyweight champion at 45. And, he just had that face. like it was two different men, wasn't it? The Foreman who beat Frazier and fought Ali, and then the Foreman that came back. And you said, or someone said, in that early spell, it was quite a grisly, surly.
Miserable sod.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a miserable sod, and he very, as I said before, monosyllabic in his replies. You'd struggled to do an interview. Went out, become a preacher, come back, and it was the unbelievable change in him, and was loved by everybody. Like Ali was loved by everybody. He became the same sort of person. But anyway, I said all my stuff yesterday. Let Eddie say what he's got to say about it. But he was he's an icon of boxing. He's an icon of sport, of the heavyweight division. Just an amazing fighter. I think he fought Evander Holyfield on his comeback as well. And that's a good Evander Holyfield, a really good Evander Holyfield, amazing fighter.
Just to bring it back to Colin, I didn't actually bring this to your attention yesterday. Colin said on BoxNation years ago I'll play it for you now.
I mean, if you get hit by somebody like Dubois, and I'm on record as saying he's the hardest single punching heavyweight I've ever seen in this country, and that includes Ernest Lewis and Frank Bruno.
And I said to you yesterday, he actually wrote an article in The Sun years ago when Daniel was just coming through. Don't worry about Fury, don't worry about Joshua. This is the kid that's going to take over the heavyweight division. And in some regards, he's been proven right, Frank, about Daniel.
Yeah, I'm glad you found that piece. I mean, it tells you about Colin, doesn't it? And that's from a young age. I bet that's quite a while ago. He was right. He was right. I mean, he is a tremendous puncher. I don't care who you are. If he hits you, you've been hit. He could do that to anybody if he catches him. And if he catches him, you are in trouble. And you're in trouble because if he don't knock you out with that shot, what comes next will take you out. He's a good finisher.
They're trying to make Usyk Dubois too. If that does come to fruition, that leaves Joseph Parker needing a fight in between his world title shot, Eddie. Would Joshua be happy to run that back with Joseph Parker?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's the first or second choice or a priority, but AJ's got to fight someone. If we don't get Fury, which, is down to him, if we don't get Dubois, then really we got to fight someone. And Joseph Parker has earned the right for a big fight. They've already boxed in a unification. It was, quite a while ago now. But yeah, Joseph's beaten Wilder. He's beaten Zhang. He's beaten Bacoli. I think he deserves a shot at the world heavyweight title. But if Usyk fights Dubois, Parker's going to need a big fight. And he's kind of beaten everybody. So yeah, I think we definitely can't rule that out. It's not a top priority, but AJ's going to be ready to fight the back end of the summer. And it's got to be against a top 10 guy. And Joseph's earned the right for the big fights.
Frank, to flip that, if Usyk Dubois 2 doesn't happen, would you consider running it back with Joshua 2?
Of course we would. I mean, I've got to look at all consider everything for Daniel. That goes without saying. If he doesn't, then Usyk's then got to fight Joe Parker. The WBO have ordered that because that's the next mandatory, or vacate the title. So they're the options for the three-time three belt champion. Whatever happens, he's going to be in action, and he's got to make a decision very, very soon. At the moment, we're going to get to a situation, if we don't agree terms, then we're going to have to agree terms for Joe Parker to fight him, or we go to purse bids.
Okay. Just to close this off, I'm going to play 2 quick games, right? So I'm going to give you 7 potential fights. 7 that you could make, and I want you to say, be honest, whether you'd accept it for that guy, your guy. So the first one I've got...
Good game. It's actually quite good. Did you come up with this?
Yes,
Very good. Very good. Very good.
The first one is Shakur Stevenson v. Jadir Herrera. Would you take that?
Yes.
Would you take that?
Yes. I mean, I think Shakur would fight anyone. I don't think he necessarily knows who Herrera is yet, but he's he actually probably will. But he's a boxing enthusiast, Shakur, and he'll fight everyone. Obviously, he's looking for Tank and the massive fights, but he would fight anyone.
It's obviously early to put Shakur in, but the opportunity is too big, I guess, Frank. Or do you think he can beat
I've got
Shakur?
to be honest, I fancy him. I fancy him in the fight. It won't be an easy fight, and Shakur's a good fighter, but I really do believe in him. And I think if he gets the opportunity, he's going to show the world what he's all about.
Okay. Sam Noakes v Andy Cruz.
Yes.
I guess it obvious.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Dalton Smith v Pierce O'Leary.
Yes.
Great fight. I mean, we've got so many 140 pounders, and Frank's put Pierce O'Leary's name down for all of them. Obviously we've got Hitchens, the world champion, but Jack Catterall, George Kambosos, Dalton Smith. Dalton's obviously fighting April 19th, and then he's got his shot at the world title. But if that's delayed for any reason, why not?
Yeah.
Pierce is ready to fight all of them. He's at that stage now. Otherwise, all he's going to do is have ticking over fights.
Okay. Sam Gilly v Ishmael Davis.
That's a good fight.
Yeah, really
That's
good
a bloody good fight. Yeah, I like that one.
Okay. Hamza Shiraz, who's going up to super middleweight, v Diego Pacheco.
Yeah, that's a tough fight, but I like that fight.
We also talked about Hamza Shiraz against Edgar Berlanga at 160.
Is Edgar still with you? Or?
Yeah, we were. I mean, look, he's going to go out and see what fights are out there, but he's made it clear he'd like to work with us, and we think he's a good fighter with a big future still. So that's a fight that we've put forward.
What about a Pacheco fight?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. Chev Clark v Alois Jr.
Yes.
Good fight. I mean, Chev's fighting Vidal Riley, British Cruiserweight Championship. I like Alois. He's very exciting. And it's two big punchers.
He is, and that's a very good fight. And I'll tell you one thing's for sure, it'll be an exciting fight. Alois is against one of our youngsters, and he's a dangerous man.
Right, last one. They've got to win their next fights. Adelaide's got to beat TKV and Fisher's got to beat Allen. But if that does happen, Adelaide Fisher.
Yeah, I like that fight.
Good fight. It's actually one we looked at before.
Yeah, we did.
Because
actually.
Adelaide looked like he was struggling, got beat, and then he's come back with a good win.
Correct.
And now he's fighting TKV. Good fight.
Yeah,
Great fight on the heavyweight card.
Yeah.
Right, quick fire. Otherwise, I'm going to get told off by Fred Meller over there. Quick fantasy fights, right? So tell me why quickly in 10 seconds your guy wins. Ricky Hatton v Kelbrook. Why would Ricky win?
Because I think Ricky at his best was better than Kel at his best.
Do you think Kel would win that fight?
I think Kel at his very best would beat Ricky Hatton, but it's a tremendous fight. It would have to be the Kell Brook that beat Sean Porter in Los Angeles when he was absolutely dialed in and razor focused. He was a special talent, Kell Brook.
And at his best, it'd have to be Ricky Hatton against Costa Zoo, who was pound for pound #1 in the world at the time.
Billy Joe Saunders v Darren Barker. Why would Billy win?
I think because he's the better fighter all round. And I like Darren, by the way. Wouldn't knock him, but I think he's the better fighter.
You backing Darren?
He's Darren Barker, isn't he? He's dazzling Dow. Come on.
Joe Calzaghe v Carl Froch.
No brainer. Anybody, and he's not even answered it, but Eddie, but that, I'd have my house on that.
Do you have to concede that one to him?
No, I would never back against Carl Froch because he was the most stubborn, tightest bastard I've ever. I love Carl Froch, but I'll tell you something now. He would scrap with you for a 5-penny piece on the floor. So
Should have made it winner take all then.
yeah, he's
That's what we should have done.
he's got
Joe was special though, wasn't
yeah. I mean, it's
He didn't
it's
want to fight Joe. I sat down with him in a hotel, the Polo Bar of the Westbury Hotel, and he brought his advisor down. Twice I had meetings with him.
I wasn't around there, so I can't.
He didn't want it. When he was with Mick Henderson.
Terrible style for Carl. Terrible
It's a
stuff.
terrible style for anybody. And I tell you what, his work rate was unbelievable. Unbelievable work rate.
Johnny Nelson v Tony Bellew.
That's a tough one, That's a tough one. Johnny Nelson, at his best, was a hard fighter to beat, at his best. He was with me, I think he was world champion for 8 years. And he was the fighter that no one wanted to see. I remember when Naz brought him and kept saying...
we've done the world championship for Johnny Nelson
in
against
Sheffield.
Carlos De
He
Leon.
nearly
Oh
finished
my God.
boxing, didn't he, in the UK? But he could be a boring sod. But Naz said, at the time, he's his gym mate, sign him up. And I remember the very first time I used that expression, I said, he was fighting in my garden, I closed the curtains. But I did sign him. And cut a long story short, I did sign him up, and we got him in the position, and he was a world champion for 8 years.
Would he beat Bellew?
At his best, it'd be a real tough fight. Tony Bellew at his best was a very, very good fighter. He went into a couple of fights I thought he'd get beaten in and won them. So, it was quite a close fight.
Who you got?
Of course, I'm back in Tony. I think Tony was an underrated cruiser. I mean, look, I remember even before we started representing him when Frank had him. I mean, he boxed Oval McKenzie, got dropped, got up off the deck to win that fight. The Makabu win was a massive win because he was in trouble, got dropped. Tough bastard.
Naples Beverly fight, which was in Liverpool. Going into the 10th round, there was nothing in that fight. And Nathan nicked the last 2 rounds. That was it. But, he's shown what he's all about. He went and won the world title. As Eddie said, done the business. I'll never take away what somebody does in the ring.
Last one I had was Fury Joshua, but I don't even have to ask you that. We know who you'd both go for.
Let's
that.
hope we find out one day.
Maybe. Thank you for your time, gents.
Cheers.